A correctional officer named Daniel Rees was making his routine rounds along D Block, the most restricted corridor inside ADX Florence Supermax Prison. A hand. Rees called it in, his voice clipped and controlled, but his pulse was racing. When the cell door finally opened under authorization from Central Command, what they found inside would never officially exist in any public report. Inmate number 87,941 was dead. No visible wounds. No blood. No signs of struggle. Just a man sprawled on the floor of a cell designed to eliminate every possible risk. A cell where death wasn't supposed to happen quietly, and yet it had. No movement. Still, no one ever talked. No one survived long enough to testify. Inmate number 87,941, real name Marcus Hale, was serving multiple life sentences for orchestrating an interstate weapons trafficking network. Not with his lawyer, not with a chaplain. With federal oversight, the request was denied. 2 days later, Hale was found dead. Claire arrived at ADX Florence under the cover of a routine audit. She wasn't greeted. She was processed. Scanned. Logged. Her badge taken and replaced with a temporary clearance card that allowed her into only specific areas. You won't need to go near D Block, the warden told her, his tone polite but firm. Nothing of interest there. Claire cross-checked timestamps, camera logs, movement records. Hale hadn't left his cell in 13 days. No exercise yard, no showers. No human contact beyond food being slid through a slot in the door. That alone was irregular. ADX Florence was built on isolation, but not absolute sensory deprivation. There were rules, strict ones, and someone had bent them. Then she noticed something else. The cameras, every inch of ADX Florence was monitored, except for a 10-minute gap in the footage from D Block, recorded between 3:58 a.m. and 4:08 a.m., the exact window in which Hale had died. The explanation was simple. According to the report, routine system recalibration. Claire leaned back in her chair, staring at the screen. She requested interviews. One guard agreed to talk off the record. Daniel Ruiz sat across from her in a small, windowless room, his hands clasped tightly together. He hadn't slept since the discovery. "I didn't see anyone go in or out," he said quietly. Ruiz swallowed. "There are blind spots, not many, but enough. And sometimes doors open that don't show up in the logs." Claire raised an eyebrow. "Doors don't open by themselves." "No," Ruiz said, "they don't." He leaned forward, lowering his voice. Hale wasn't supposed to be in full isolation. He was being punished, off the books. For what? For talking. The words hung heavy in the air before Claire could press further. The interview was terminated. Ruiz was escorted out. Later that day, she learned he had been placed on administrative leave for procedural violations. That night, alone in her hotel room miles away from the prison, Claire reviewed her notes. Hale had been silenced. Ruiz had been removed. And whatever was happening inside ADX Florence was protected by layers of authority that went far beyond one warden. Then her phone buzzed. No caller ID. Claire stared at the screen, her heart pounding. ADX Florence woke up angry. The lockdown that followed Marcus Hale's death had officially been lifted, but the prison felt tighter than before, like a fist closing slowly. Movement was reduced. Guards spoke less. Doors stayed sealed longer than necessary. Silence, already a weapon here, had become a warning. Claire Hargreave felt it the moment she passed through the outer gates again. She shouldn't have been allowed back in. After the anonymous call and the leaked photo, protocol demanded her removal from the case. Instead, someone higher up had overruled it. No explanation, no paper trail. That worried her more than being kicked out. Inside the administrative wing, Claire reviewed the photograph again. Metadata confirmed it hadn't been altered. The timestamp was real. The angle suggested the image was taken from inside the cell too close, too intimate to be a security camera feed. Someone had stood inches away from Marcus Hale in his final moments. Someone with access. Claire requested the camera maintenance logs. What she received was incomplete. Names redacted. Time blocks missing. The recalibration excuse was still there, but now it was cleaner, tighter. Someone had scrubbed the details after the fact. She followed the trail anyway. There were only 4 technicians authorized to work on D-block systems. 2 were on leave. 1 was retired. The 4th, Evan Mercer, had transferred out of ADX Florence the morning after Hale's death. Claire found Mercer's file thin and unremarkable. Former Air Force, 8 years with the Bureau of Prisons. No disciplinary actions. But buried in his transfer paperwork was a note that didn't belong. Expedited reassignment. Approved per special directive. No signature, no department. Claire drove 3 hours to a federal facility outside Denver where Mercer had landed. She never made it inside. By the time she arrived, the building was surrounded by emergency vehicles. Yellow tape snapped in the cold wind. A body bag was being loaded into the back of a van. Evan Mercer had been found dead in the parking garage. Apparent suicide. Claire stood at the perimeter, watching as agents moved with rehearsed efficiency. She didn't need to see the body to know what it meant. The people connected to Marcus Hale were now dead, and neither of them had been supposed to talk. Back at ADX Florence, the prison's internal investigation accelerated not to uncover the truth, but to contain it. Claire could feel the shift. Requests denied faster, emails unanswered, doors closed. That afternoon, she received another message. This one wasn't anonymous. It came through official channels, marked urgent. Cease all independent inquiries. Report to administrative conference room C immediately. When Claire entered the room, she wasn't alone. Suicides. Noticed what? Reese hesitated. Then he reached under the mattress and pulled out a folded sheet of paper, a map. Not of the prison layout. Of its sublevels. They found me, he whispered. A moment later, the power cut out. Darkness swallowed the room. Gunshots shattered the silence. Claire duffed to the floor as glass exploded inward. Reese fired back blindly. Shouting for her to run, she crawled toward the bathroom as bullets tore through the thin walls. Then it stopped. Suddenly. Completely. No sirens. No footsteps. Just silence. Claire emerged slowly. Reese lay on the floor, bleeding but alive. The attackers were gone. They didn't come to kill me, he gasped. They came to scare you. He pressed something into her hand. A flash drive. Everything Hale sent, Ruiz said. Recordings, logs, names. Claire didn't hesitate. She ran. 3 days later, she was back east, safe but restless. She uploaded the contents of the drive onto an isolated system. What she found made her stomach drop: audio files, video clips, internal reports, inmate interviews conducted in total darkness, voices breaking, men begging for sound, for light, for proof they still existed, and one familiar voice, Marcus Hale. They say this place has no secrets, Hale whispered in the recording. That's the lie. The real prison is what they don't admit exists. The final file was labeled simply Nix. Claire opened it. It was a live feed from inside ADX Florence, from a cell she recognized, and sitting in the center of the frame, under dim artificial light, was an inmate who wasn't supposed to be there. He had been executed 5 years ago, and he was smiling. The man on the screen lifted his head slowly, as if he knew he was being watched. His name was Jonathan Creel. 5 years earlier, Creel had been convicted of coordinating a series of bombings that killed 37 people across 3 states. The trial had been public, the sentence absolute: death by lethal injection at a federal facility in Indiana. News footage showed his final walk. Official records confirmed his execution down to the minute. And yet here he was, alive, seated cross-legged on the concrete floor of a cell deep inside ADX Florence. His face older but unmistakable. His eyes were clear, calm, a faint smile pulled at the corner of his mouth, not the smile of relief, but of anticipation. Claire shut down the live feed and disconnected the system. Her hands were shaking. If Creel was alive, then everything was a lie, not just at Florence, but the machinery above it, the courts, the executions. The records meant to reassure the public that justice had been served. This wasn't a prison. It was a laboratory. Claire went dark. No calls, no emails. She moved between safe locations, copying the files, encrypting them, preparing for a release that would shatter institutions. But the deeper she dug, the clearer the pattern became. ADX Florence wasn't just holding the worst of the worst, it was testing them. Psychological endurance trials, sensory deprivation beyond legal limits, behavioral conditioning designed to strip identity, then rebuild it, not to rehabilitate but to control. Those who broke were erased, those who adapted were reassigned. Jonathan Creel wasn't supposed to exist anymore because he had passed their test. Claire made one mistake. She assumed she still had time. Her apartment door opened without a sound. By the time she reached for her phone, the lights were already on. 3 people stood inside. Calm, familiar, federal oversight. "We warned you," one of them said. Claire didn't scream. She didn't plead. She smiled. "Too late," she said. She pressed a key. Across multiple secure servers, the files went live, scheduled releases to journalists, watchdog organizations, and international courts. Audio, video, names, dates, faces. The truth spilled out in waves. Or so she thought. Within minutes, emergency injunctions were issued. Stories pulled. Videos flagged. Accounts suspended. The narrative shifted overnight. Disinformation, they called it. Fabrication. A disgruntled investigator with a history of obsession, Claire was detained under sealed charges. No court date, no press access, no explanation. She disappeared quietly. 3 weeks later, ADX Florence announced internal restructuring. A few low-level administrators resigned. A committee was formed. Reforms were promised. The story faded, but inside the prison, things changed. The sub-level rooms were sealed, equipment removed, personnel reassigned. The experiment, at least officially, was over. Jonathan Creel was moved, not released, transferred. No record of where. 6 months passed. Then a journalist in Berlin received an unmarked package. Inside was a phone. On it, a single video file. It showed a small concrete room, brighter than ADX Florence, cleaner. Somewhere else. Jonathan Creel stood facing the camera. "They told me the world thinks I'm dead," he said calmly. That's the cost of progress. He stepped aside, revealing others behind him. Men and women. Familiar faces, names once printed in headlines and etched into memorials. Executed, killed in custody, dead by suicide. All they wanted, Creel continued, was to see how far the human mind could bend before it broke. The video cut to black. 3 days later. A bombing tore through a government building in Eastern Europe. The method was precise. The signature unmistakable. Jonathan Creel's. Security agencies scrambled. Analysts insisted it was a copycat hoax. But deep inside a classified facility in the American Southwest, a man watched the news feed in silence. The warden, no longer of a prison, but of something far more discreet, turned to his aide. "It worked," he said. "What did?" the aide asked. "The program," the warden replied. "They didn't break." The aide hesitated. "And Investigator Hargreave," the warden paused. "She's still alive," he said. For now. Months later, in a dimly lit cell with no windows and no sound, Claire Hargreave sat alone. A door opened. A familiar voice spoke from the darkness. "They told me you wouldn't survive this place," Jonathan Creel said softly. Claire looked up, her eyes adjusting. "Looks like we both proved them wrong," she replied. The door closed. And somewhere in the world, another headline was already being written. If you think this story was intense, you're not ready for the next one. Stay close. Don't blink.